Hi and welcome to Undercurrent. I'm your host, Lucy Marchant. In this week's episode, we talk about the census. We also look at people's attitudes towards the refugee crisis. But for our first story, Education Minister Peter Collier announced an increase in the budget for students with learning difficulties. Bianca Wood finds out how this will help students with autism.
On the 24th of July, the Western Australian Government released a statement promising increased help for students with learning difficulties. I spoke to Executive Director of Statewide Services, Lindsay Hale, and Director of Therapy and Clinical Services at the Autism Association, Tasha Alich, to find out more and how it will benefit the students of Western Australia. Why is the government increasing the funding for children with learning difficulties? Why now?
It's a modest increase, to be honest, in our support for students with disabilities. So there is an enormous amount of funding that goes towards this, but we took a bit of a look at how things were going for students with disabilities and felt that there were some particular areas that we could focus on to make some adjustment. We'll be progressively moving out to 16 schools, and that includes 4 existing secondary programs that we'll make some adjustments to, and an expansion into the primary sector. And eventually what we want is a service that goes from K to 12. So the things we're going to be looking at in identifying where best to go will be on need, where there are numbers of students with autism.
Autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder and it's pervasive. So often children present quite differently. Some of the main features of autism is that the children have difficulties with communication, and again that can vary. So some children may have very limited communication and not have words. Children with autism may have difficulties with their behaviour, their social skills, their understanding of what to do in social situations, and they could have difficulty being able to be engaged in activities that aren't associated with their interests, which again has an impact on how they're able to participate in early childhood settings.
And roughly how many children in Western Australia have autism?
Well, probably the most recent data would say that there's 1 in 100 children that are diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder.
And how would you say it impacts families?
For families, it's very difficult understanding what autism is and what it means to means for their child and for their family, and it is ongoing. So once they're aware that their child has autism, they often don't know what to do next. Once the child's in school, there's often different challenges that present themselves that families need a lot of support to be able to navigate through the school system, to be able to make education a good opportunity for their child.
And why do children with autism spectrum disorder require extra help at school?
They're visual learners, so information that's presented to them auditorily is not well processed. So if things are well structured, there's a lot of predictability and routine, and there's visual supports to show them what is expected of them to be able to participate, that really will make a difference to their ability to be able to learn in the classroom.
What we're looking at with a program like this is just to increase some focused support, but within a mainstream setting. So for many children and young people with autism, with a little bit of extra support, they're able to engage in a mainstream school quite successfully. Some of these students have greater challenges, and it's really those students that we're looking at here.
16 schools that are going to have additional resources and support located on site of a mainstream primary school, and it's going to be a great opportunity for students that have autism at that school or from surrounding areas to be able to come to a school that is embracing autism, where they can participate for a half a day in a satellite classroom where there's, less children and increased staff ratios. And then for the other half of the day, they get the opportunity to go into the mainstream classroom where they can continue to develop those peer relationships with other peers that are also attending the school.
We're going through a process now to identify where the first primary program will be for next year. That one will open at the start of next year, and then progressively over the coming years we'll expand that out to the full range of 16 programs.
This has been Bianca Wood reporting for Undercurrent.
The Australian government policy on a refugee resettlement in Australia is loud and clear. This week I spoke to Ramdas Sankaran from the Ethnic Communities Council of WA to discuss how this policy has affected Australian attitudes towards refugees. Ramdas, why did the government change its policy and introduce offshore processing in the first place?
People would justify offshore processing in terms of it being a deterrent. As far as the Ethnic Communities Council and people like me are concerned, it is morally and ethically, unconscionable. It is socially reprehensible and economically very foolish. I say, ethically and morally, reprehensible and unconscionable because we don't need to look much further than the PNG Supreme Court decision. What the five-man judges unanimously found was that the people who we had sent to Manus Island, their personal liberty was being breached, and it clearly was contravening Papua New Guinea's constitution, and the Australian government and the PNG government were ordered to release these people and process their claims appropriately and immediately. That happened in April. We are now in August, and nothing has changed. For a democratic country like Australia to so blatantly flout, the law of our neighbouring nation is just unimaginable. But that's what's happening.
Are there any signs of a change in policy anytime soon?
I would like to think with the number of people in the Senate who don't belong to the two major parties, and with the Greens clearly opposed to these policies, some change may happen hopefully sooner rather than later.
And the refugee conversation in Australia, has it changed? Have people's attitudes changed over time?
Generally speaking, I think the Australian public have been more than reasonably accepting of refugees and doing our fair share of resettling people in refugee and refugee-like situations globally. I think what has changed over time and more recently, of course, is the bipartisan attitude or the bipartisan position that the coalition and the Labour parties have taken in relation to refugees. It doesn't help when the three major parties are at one in terms of the horrid, for want of a better word, refugee policies that we've been implementing in the last 15, 20 years.
The media has always played a big role in the conversation. How has it been impacted by its lack of access to detention centres?
In terms of the lack of media access, I think that's a pathetic excuse if the media is going to trot that out as their inadequate and woeful coverage of these issues. The way I look at it, unfortunately, the media, by its actions or inactions, has led to what I would call a total desensitization of people's responses to what happens to refugees, both within this country, let alone when they are offshore.
What do you think it will take to change people's attitudes towards this issue?
Well, programs like this is a great start, but unless the mainstream media, starts doing what programs like yours is doing, I don't have much hope from a media perspective. There's a big chunk of Australian people who effectively do not want this to continue. But by the bipartisan policy positions that have been adopted, they are effectively being denied what they want. You have a choice to vote for, most people vote for either of these two parties, and both parties have the same position. And yet there are many people within those parties themselves, let alone those of us who don't belong to any of those parties, who are fiercely opposed to this policy. And in a democratic country like us, I think it's disgraceful that such a loud voice in terms of numbers is being silenced and being denied the opportunity to get their wishes fulfilled.
Lucy Marchant for Undercurrent. Next week, Australians will be asked to fill out a census form. How much do you know about the census? Bas Tadros hit the streets and found out.
August 9 is Census Night, a moment for us to pause and take stock. But you may be wondering how the census has changed and how safe your data is. Let's find out. The 2016
9th of
census
August
will count
is
close to
officially
10
census date. Basically, this is the biggest national survey finding out the demographics of the population, and we're going to hit the streets of Perth and find out what people in Perth feel about census date. If it is in fact an invasion of privacy, or if there's concerns with regards to it going online recently, or whether people are actually thinking it's a great thing for the future and for planning.
I think it's good that we can collect that information.
No negative ones, only positive, because they've got to keep a record of how we're tracking population-wise, residential, the whole lot.
I think it's really important for Australia to know how many people live in our country, to know various data and demographics of where people are living, how people are living.
Well, it definitely helps government plan for the future based on population growth and the overseas migrants, all that sort of stuff. So make sure they've got all the infrastructure in place.
I think it's mostly necessary to find out, the type of people that we have living in our country, what sort of jobs they have, and maybe where we might need more funding.
I'd like to think that the data is collated and looked at effectively and decisions made that's going to benefit the whole community.
I don't believe in it, I don't like it, and even though I fill it out, anything that I find of a personal nature, like anything to do with financial or legal, I've just put down personal on it and leave it at that.
I don't trust the government. I don't trust their computer systems. So I've asked for a paper form, and I'm going to seriously consider if I'm going to put my name to it or not. I don't see no reason why they want my name.
Do you feel the data is being misused, or do you feel there's lack of privacy?
Terribly, on both accounts.
They haven't explained themselves well enough to ask why they want names. I'm concerned they're probably going to sell my name off to some online retail mob to say, this bloke's he's a certain age group and he's going to buy certain items. Why did I want my name?
I can see people's concern for it, but the way I look at it, I've got nothing to hide, go for it.
I don't think it's an invasion of privacy, and I think it is something that's necessary.
I haven't gone through the forms. As long as they don't ask what your driver's licence is, if you've got a credit card or things like that, I'm fine with it.
What are your thoughts about it going online?
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, really good.
If anything, it makes it more easy and convenient to do.
It's the way of the future, it's how things happen, it makes it much more convenient for people.
If you can do all that online, that's great, as long as it's got a security aspect to it. I think people might be okay with it.
I don't really have an issue with that. I think it's probably more for those who are maybe computer literate, for those people, whether they get the option to do it manually, I don't know.
Well, I'm doing mine by paper. I could do it online, but I'm doing it by paper. I've got the thing at home. So.
Census has been around for many, many years. It only happens every so often, every 6 years. So I think it's definitely an important thing, and I hope people open the door with a smile on their face and give the information needed.
Bas Tadros for Undercurrent.
Stay with us for more Undercurrent after a short break. Welcome back to Undercurrent. There's a mentoring program in WA that is helping and guiding high school students to be job ready or uni ready. Bas Tadros finds out more.
Today I'm talking to Carl Moyes. He's one of the supporters on an incredible program that's been launched here in Perth. It's an educational program called Just Started, and it's just recently gone national. The program itself is an educational program that is tailored for 14 to 15-year-old students in school who can utilise amazing business skills and a particular model that is known to create success, for them to take that and create the success that they need in their life.
The actual program itself is based on the lean startup methodology, which is a Silicon Valley startup business way of doing things for the future. So rather than the traditional way of doing business whereby we write up a big business plan, we go to the banks, we try and get funding that way, this is all about fail cheaply, pivot, rebound, and then come up with new solutions. And it's all based on current real world problems as well. So for example, what's unique about this program is because it's aimed at students, students aren't so blocked in how they view the world. They're very open in that everything is a possibility. So the ideas that they come up with based on problems they see in the world are so fresh and invigorating that it's even getting older people like myself to really get re-inspired by being involved in the program. I know for myself, when I finished my different levels of education and started working in the real world, there was a big divide between where education ended and where the real world began. And what's beautiful about this program is we're teaching kids real world skills that are going to see them through for the rest of their lives, especially around creative problem solving.
More recently, there was a finalist week, I believe, here in Perth. Can you tell us a bit about that and what determined the winner?
So the way the program works is it's an 18-week in-school program that's supported by an industry mentor. Over the course of those 18 weeks, like my classroom that I was a mentor in, for example, we went from 5 teams down to 3 teams, and each team had like their own idea, base or solution to a problem they were trying to resolve. Towards the end of the program, those 3 teams had an internal pitch-off. So one of those teams went through to a semi-final. I think there was about 26 to 30 teams that went through to the semi-finals. And then from there, 11 teams went through to the grand final, which was held last week. In terms of the grand final, the winners were Northern Beaches Christian School from the New South Wales over in Sydney, and they pitched a fantastic idea called the Perfect Present Pack. So for people like yourself and me who have got young kids and you're looking to do that perfect party event, their app is all about go to this, download bits and pieces, purchase this, and it comes in from there. Now in terms of criteria of what makes the winning team, it's criteria based on a number of things. So it's not just how good the individual idea is. It's also about how well they've pitched their idea, so how smart or slick they are in front of a camera or on stage, and also about the validation. So how much research have they done? How much feedback have they had from the market that there is a need for this product out there as well? And for this school in particular, they probably had the slickest presentation of the night. It was really, to see 14-year-old kids that confident on stage blew me away. And they'd done a lot of validation. They'd actually spoken to like well-established brands, I think like Toys R Us, to have a conversation about their product and whether they would want to partner with them. And they ticked all the boxes from there. The program is twofold. One is to give the kids the education and the insights into the startup methodology. But the other part is hopefully to try and turn these ideas into fully fledged businesses so that we are co-creating the economy of the future.
Bas Tadros for Undercurrent.
An ex-military service organisation in Perth is calling for a ban of Pokemon Go on sacred sites, such as the Kings Park Memorial. James Burnside reports.
Pokemon Go has taken the game off of the small screens and into the real world, as people go out and socialise and actively see the world and explore, searching for those little amazing creatures. But for some, this is not just an exercise in social interaction. For some, this is a sign of disrespect, as people in charge of the memorial here at Kings Park can attest. Players flock in the thousands, and often make it very difficult for people to actually do the memorial services and indeed take away from the quiet reflection that this memorial represents. Raising the question, is it okay to play Pokemon Go in certain areas, and how should we adjust? Can you name any recent incidents of Pokemon Go players being disruptive?
Yeah, last Sunday we had 2 services here. The first one was a nice early one and there wasn't many people around, but at midday we had one for the Macedonians, and they had a fairly large crowd here, and we were gathered around the cenotaph, and with the ropes now on the lawns trying to keep people off the grass and more pristine than they are at the moment, they were squeezing between the people standing to attention while the last post was being played and trying to move down onto Anzac Bluff.
So what would you say to anyone attempting to play Pokemon Go at the memorial site? What would you say to try and convince them to maybe go somewhere else?
Well, I just like them to show some respect. I have no problem with them walking around on the footpath playing Pokemon, other than if there's a ceremony on. I just like them to stay away from that area. The ceremonies are fairly short and it doesn't take that much effort to show that respect.
How does it make you feel seeing people running around playing the game at a memorial site?
Initially it didn't worry me, and whilst we haven't got a service on it, doesn't particularly worry me either, other than I'd rather they didn't drape themselves all over the memorial. But people getting out and being active and maybe even getting their head out of their phone occasionally, maybe they'll learn something about what the War Memorial's all about.
But not everyone shares the same view as Jeff Simpson. Others take a different approach. Rob Kober at the Sociology Department of UWA has a different view on what Pokemon Go means and what it means to sacred spaces. There's been a lot of controversy about Pokemon Go being played in so-called sacred spaces as well as institutions of education. As a teacher in an institution of education, do you think Pokemon Go is disruptive or intrusive?
Look, I haven't seen any disruption as a result of Pokemon Go so far. We're hearing some really interesting stories about disruptions lately, and they seem to be centering on two things. One is on monuments and the idea that they're not being treated respectfully if people are gathering around them. The other is around parks and public spaces and the creation of noise at night, which might be a slightly more serious one. I think the monuments is interesting, but one thing that we're finding with playing Pokemon Go is that people are becoming aware of monuments that they weren't aware of or thinking of them in new ways. So the fact that they're coming up as Pokestops means people are looking at things that they passed by every day for much of their life and suddenly realising, oh wow, that actually is a monument and this might actually mean something, and getting that backstory around it as well. You've got that side, and then on the other one, the public spaces, I think there's something interesting around that. Some of it's being framed, maybe not necessarily quite rightly, but being framed as generational. So some of the reports we're seeing are trying to use this rather adversarial stereotype that this is older people condemning younger people playing Pokemon Go. And I think that that's not actually playing out when we look at the statistics or the ages or what we know of people who are playing at the moment.
I am James Burnside and you are watching Undercurrent.
A new solo art exhibition is opening in town. It is a celebration of young, local creative minds. Our Undercurrent reporter Sandy meets with Kelly Orr, the artist behind the paintings.
Today we are at Beyond Art Gallery in North Perth, visiting one of Perth's up-and-coming artists. Her name is Kelly Orr. Let's go in and take a look. So Kelly, Higher Ground, why give your exhibition this name?
Well, my exhibition is about Perth creatives, so all of the different people I painted are people linked to Perth in some way who've done really well in their creative career. So for me, I chose the name Higher Ground because I felt that all the people who've taken a plunge to have a creative career sometimes it can be harder at the start to get your career going, and there are more challenges than, say, like an office job. But then ultimately they've reached a point where they feel more satisfied by their life and their career than they would have otherwise if they'd taken a different path. So they've reached higher ground, literally.
Excellent. So tell me about the 12 contemporary portraits and why you chose to paint them.
So earlier this year I was working for the government and I resigned from that position to pursue a career as an artist. And all of the different people I've painted are people that I found inspiring. So they'd pursued a creative career and done really well, and I admired what they did. So I painted 13 different people, but there are 12 portraits. And each person has done something really interesting in a different type of creative career. So I've got people who have done really well as actors and directors, who work in the theatre. And then I've got people who own design agencies and online magazines and run annual art exhibitions to raise money for charities and that kind of thing.
What inspired you to become an artist?
Art's been something that I've always really liked and been really interested in. I have a degree in design that I did after I finished high school, and then kind of got carried away by the idea of different jobs where I was making some money, and they were really interesting and I learnt lots of challenges, but ended up finding myself kind of pulled away from art. And then I found I was getting back into it a lot last year, and then I got really carried away with it, I suppose, and I was spending like my lunch breaks on Instagram looking at the artist's work, and after work I was going home and painting in the evenings and on the weekends. But I just found I had all these ideas and there wasn't enough time in the working week to try and actually pursue all of those ideas. So my portraits take about 40 hours to do each. So if I was to try and do that during or while I was working full time, then it would probably take me about 7 weeks to complete one if I was just doing it on the weekend or something. So I had all these ideas and I wanted to try and action those ideas as quickly as possible.
And do you have any advice for young artists pursuing their dream?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people tell me that they get quite intimidated by looking at other artists' work. So what I would say to them is that artists have put so much time and effort into their paintings or whatever artworks they're doing, and they've basically been working at this over years and building up these skills, and especially focusing on one particular skill set as well. And a lot of people are put off by looking at works that they really like because they think, I could never be like that, I could never achieve that kind of goal. But the way that you get to achieve those big goals is by doing little things each day that work towards an overall goal and taking little steps each day.
And Kelly, just remind us, where can we find you?
So I operate I'm a resident at the Up on Hay studio in Subiaco. And also, if you want to come and have a look at the exhibition, it's at the Beyond Art Gallery on Charles Street in North Perth. And you can contact me via my Facebook site to arrange an appointment.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. That's a very inspiring story. Congratulations.
Thanks so much.
What an inspirational story. I might catch you guys down here. I'm Sandy DeRocco reporting for Undercurrent.
Thank you for watching this episode of Undercurrent. Don't forget to catch up with us online. Take care, and we'll see you next time.